A woman was horrified to discover a terrifying scene downstairs. An elderly homeless man had become fused with the pavement itself. His skin and body had melded seamlessly into the ground. Rescue workers tried desperately to free him, but his legs had already transformed into part of the road, making separation impossible. Yet, that wasn't even the most frightening part. As the woman glanced around, she noticed a single eye growing out of the wall right behind her. The story began with an emergency alert. In an apartment in Brussels, Belgium, a designer named ANX was busy working at his computer as usual. But just as he was brainstorming ideas, he received a call from the community. They informed him that a strange infectious disease had broken out nearby. Instinctively, ANX opened his laptop and checked the official government website, where the Public Health Center had just posted an urgent announcement. It turned out that a bizarre virus was spreading rapidly across Europe. Once infected, victims would develop strange, small flesh-like growths on their skin. Along with these growths came eerie cracks and bark-like textures. Reading the news online, ANX initially thought this might be some kind of skin disease. Concerned, he called his girlfriend Cass to warn her to be careful if she was going to a party. But just as he dialed her number, the health authorities updated their announcement, revealing that this virus was far more serious than anyone had imagined. Worried, ANX hurried to the bathroom, stripped off his clothes, and carefully examined his body, following the symptoms described in the alert. Seeing no strange flesh-like growths or bumps, he finally felt some relief. Just then, he heard Cass calling from the doorway. When he opened the door, Cass had come to stay with him. It turned out her neighborhood had suddenly been put under lockdown that morning, with orders for everyone to stay inside and not leave their homes. Learning about the flu-like outbreak in her area, Cass had packed her bags and left just before the lockdown was enforced. ANX wanted to check if Cass was infected, but she hugged him tightly before he could. A few minutes later, satisfied, Cass went to freshen up in the bathroom. Still uneasy, ANX grabbed a magnifying glass and gave her a thorough check. When he found no signs of infection, his anxiety finally eased. As ANX and Cass were casually discussing how this virus might have emerged, suddenly the wail of an ambulance echoed from downstairs. ANX pulled back the curtain and saw several emergency workers gathered at the street corner, examining an elderly homeless man. To their horror, the man's body had fused with the pavement. His legs were completely melded into the ground. Despite repeated attempts to free him, the workers were helpless. In the end, they had no choice but to bring out barricades, essentially leaving the poor man to become one with the street. Watching this surreal and terrifying scene from their window, ANX and Cass were frozen in shock, completely unprepared for what was coming next. That very evening, the health authorities released another urgent update. Scientists had discovered that this was no ordinary virus. Beyond the visible changes to the skin, the infection caused a horrific physical transformation. The infected would gradually merge with surrounding objects. If an infected person came into contact with stone during the process, they would become a living statue, a stone man, as the legends say. After seeing the news on TV, ANX felt a deep sense of unease. The very next morning, he rushed downstairs to the supermarket and stocked up on a large supply of essentials. Back home, he carefully sealed all the doors and windows with plastic sheets and carried out a thorough disinfection of the entire apartment. Concerned for others, ANX shared the alarming news with his friends, but they dismissed it, continuing to party and celebrate as if nothing was wrong. Unbeknownst to those revelers, the virus was spreading far faster than scientists had anticipated. In just a single day, numerous cases erupted worldwide. With France hit hardest, a staggering 98% of its population became infected. Governments across the globe quickly activated emergency protocols, confining citizens to their homes and designating special zones for those infected. Yet despite these efforts, the disaster accelerated relentlessly, with even medical personnel tasked with rescuing the sick succumbing to the infection. Watching the news reports unfold, ANX and Cass felt a flicker of relief that they had prepared early. But little did ANX know, the true nightmare was only just beginning. 2 days later, their apartment suddenly lost power. ANX tried calling the community center to find out what was happening, but the line was constantly busy. Fortunately, being a fitness enthusiast, ANX found an old stationary bike and ingeniously converted it into a makeshift generator. Using this faint power source, Cass managed to turn on the computer to check for any updates. But the internet was completely down, leaving the computer useless for connecting online. As Cass grew frustrated, she noticed a small stone lying on the floor. Thinking it must have fallen from the wall, she didn't pay much attention. But just as she picked it up, another stone fell. Sensing something was wrong, Cass crouched down for a closer look. and what she saw was horrifying. Hearing Cass's scream, ANX rushed into the bedroom and froze at the shocking sight. Under the table lay a pile of rubble, and within that pile, something was writhing. Upon closer inspection, ANX realized that their elderly neighbor had been transformed into a heap of stones. The old man, who used to spy on ANX and Cass, had drilled a small hole in the wall, but after being infected, he had somehow merged with the wall itself while spying. ANX wanted to see if he could pull the old man out, but unexpectedly, the man began to swell up. Luckily, ANX reacted quickly and shielded Cass just before the old man exploded. However, flying shards of stone still struck ANX, injuring him. Seeing her boyfriend covered in blood, Cass panicked. She carefully helped ANX onto the bed and tried to tend to his wounds. But as she removed the fragments, Cass was horrified to find that the scattered stones were actually fusing with ANX's skin. Watching ANX in pain, she felt helpless. Desperate, Cass opened the garbage chute to ask neighbors for painkillers, but everyone was struggling to survive and no one was willing to help. Even Mrs. Kim upstairs asked Cass to find her missing dog. Determined not to let ANX turn into stone, Cass forcibly pulled out the shards. After several hours of painstaking effort, all the stone fragments inside ANX were removed, but he fell into a coma. Watching over her boyfriend in bed, Cass could only pray for a miracle. Thankfully, the virus hadn't spread further, and the injured ANX soon regained consciousness. After a few days of rest, ANX fully recovered his health. Cass fired up the generator, hoping to catch any news from the health authorities. But when they turned on the radio and TV, all communication channels were dead and offline. Just as ANX was feeling frustrated, a series of surveillance footage suddenly appeared on the screen. It was clear that even the disease control center had fallen victim to the infection. Watching the disturbing footage, both of them felt helpless and unsure of what to do next. Suddenly, Cass heard strange noises coming from outside the window. At first, she thought it was just the wind rustling the plastic sheets they used to seal the windows. But when she turned around, she realized there was no wind at all. Curious, Cass moved closer and was horrified to discover that the sound was coming from the wooden boards sealing the window. Mrs. Kim's pet dog had somehow fused with the boards themselves. Luckily, ANX reacted quickly and pulled Cass to safety inside the storage room. But no sooner had they entered than they realized the storage room seemed to have shrunk dramatically. Before ANX could fully react, the walls started closing in on them, squeezing the air out of the tiny space. It turned out the old neighbor hadn't died after all. He had merged with the walls inside the room. In a panic, ANX grabbed a small knife nearby. Cass looked back and saw something chilling, a single, watchful eye appearing on the wall itself. After ANX and Cass left the storage room, they noticed the wooden boards sealing the window had disappeared. ANX hurriedly found something to barricade the storage room again, but the nightmare was far from over. As the virus continued to spread relentlessly, the supplies ANX had stored began to dwindle rapidly. Thankfully, the water supply in the apartment remained intact. However, when ANX went to check on Cass, he was horrified to find that her body had developed numerous small lumps, and her skin was starting to harden like wood, clear signs of the early stages of infection. Watching Cass lying helpless on the bed, ANX desperately tried to find a way to save her. But the virus was spreading so fast, and he had no idea how to treat it. Within just one afternoon, Cass's condition deteriorated rapidly. ANX locked himself inside the bathroom, overwhelmed and unsure of what to do next. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the trash chute. It was Mrs. Kim from upstairs, who had long since merged with the sewer system. Mrs. Kim urged ANX to stop struggling, telling him that soon he too would become part of the building's strange, living structure. Instead of fighting, she advised, it was better to accept the transformation early. Heeding Mrs. Kim's words, ANX stepped outside. By this time, Cass had reached the final stage of infection. Her body had fused completely with the bedsheets. ANX couldn't bear to give up on her. He grabbed some painkillers and a pair of scissors, hoping to cut the sheets and free her. But the sheets were inseparable from Cass's body. As soon as he made a small cut, a flood of fresh blood poured out. Desperately, ANX grabbed a pillow to stop the bleeding, but to his horror, the pillow was absorbed right into the wound. Watching Cass in agony, ANX felt utterly helpless. Slowly, he was forced to witness Cass being swallowed by the sheets. Time passed, and Cass urged ANX to leave quickly, Staying in the apartment any longer would mean he too would be assimilated. But ANX couldn't bring himself to abandon her. With all humans being consumed one by one, where else could he possibly go? As the virus's effects deepened, Cass's fusion accelerated. Within 2.5 hours, she had fully transformed into the bedsheet itself. Suddenly, the apartment began to shake. Looking up, NX noticed the walls contracting, and eerie heartbeat sounds echoed around him. When he stepped into the hallway, he was horrified to find it had transformed into something resembling intestines. It became clear one of the neighbors had merged with the entire apartment itself. Panicked, NX tried to flee from the surging flood of intestines, but the entire apartment building had already been absorbed into the living structure. There was nowhere left to run. Just as despair was about to consume him, NX spotted a passage not far away. He crawled inside, hoping for an escape, but instead, the passage led into a pitch-black void. ANX fell and was knocked unconscious. In a hazy state, he felt large hands gently stroking him, accompanied by a warm flow of water surrounding him. At first, NX thought he was succumbing to the same assimilation as the others. Then, unexpectedly, a woman's voice spoke from behind him. When he looked up, he saw a woman standing beside him. She introduced herself as Lisa, another survivor trapped within the apartment. Lisa explained that they were currently inside the building's digestive tract, and the only way out was to stimulate the intestines. Following Lisa's lead, ANX began to stimulate the walls of the intestines. Soon, a powerful current of water surged through the walls, propelling them forward. With the force of the rushing water, the two managed to escape from the intestines and back into the unknown outside world. When ANX stepped out onto the street, he was stunned to see the sky turn to dull gray, with strange snowflakes drifting down endlessly. Glancing back, he realized the apartment building had been completely absorbed, transformed into a massive, blocky mass of flesh. As ANX and Lisa stood there in disbelief, a drone suddenly appeared beside them. Turning around, ANX spotted other survivors scattered along the street. It turned out that, besides ANX, many humans had somehow avoided being absorbed. Lisa joined the group of survivors and moved on, but ANX chose to stay behind. He leaned against the building's remnants, his expression vacant and lost. Slowly, exhaustion overtook him, and he drifted into sleep. In a hazy, dreamlike state, ANX found himself in a strange, alien space. He felt his body melting, merging seamlessly with the environment around him. As ANX vanished into this otherworldly realm, the entire Earth began to transform. Every piece of matter fused together, giving birth to an entirely new form of life.